Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. May I tell you a story? Many years ago, in a land far from home, there's a good possibility that your father, or maybe even your grandfather, had decided to take the family on that long-desired vacation. And they had the '57 Chevrolet all polished up with its new white wall tires and its shiny fins, and off you went. And it was a wonderful excursion through the American Southwest. And as you came up to a little village called Kingman, Arizona, you decided you better get some gasoline for that trip all the way to California. And so you pulled into a gasoline station, and there a nice man came up all dressed up and put the gasoline in the car for you. And then a little kid came out and made sure you had plenty of cold water for the trip. Well, that kid has now a father and grandfather himself, and he has some wonderful stories to tell you about growing up as a Route 66 kid. So, thanks to the True Ranch Connection and the people of the Monument Ranch in Tombstone, Arizona, you get to hear his story, and it starts right now.
Welcome to the world of the 66 kids. We're still kicking it. And my name is Bob Boze Bell, and I'm here with Stuart Rosebrook, and we're here to talk about Two-Lane Tales. And that's the stories about those little roads that take you to sometimes places you didn't even know about. And I'm proud to say that our guest today grew up just down the road from me, and we have a lot of tall tales that are very, very similar. In fact, I haven't talked to a lawyer about suing you, Marshall Trimble, but you're from Ash Fork, I'm from Kingman. Let's start with your stories about Ash Fork is this spot in the road. How could anything have happened there? Tell us about it.
All right. Well, Ash Fork, it really kind of was, but it happened to be a junction from 1882 when the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad, we know it better today as the Santa Fe Railroad, and it crossed. It was the northern transcontinental line in Arizona, and it had a junction there beginning with a railroad builder named Frank Murphy, and Frank Murphy built a branch line beginning in 1892. They had other lines, branch lines down to Prescott. One branch line, the Bullock Road, the railroad down from Ash Fork, or not from. It was from Seligman, which they call Jerome Junction. No, excuse me. That was another line on the Santa Fe. It was called Prescott Junction, and it came down, but it was right through. It came right through a lowland that flooded out ever so often, and so washed out the railroad and washed out the tracks, and it came right down Chino Valley, which starts up around Seligman. And it comes right down to where the Verde River, the West Fork of the Verde River begins, and around in Chino Valley, and so that was a big flop. And then in 1892, Frank Murphy decided to build a railroad line, not a narrow gauge, a standard gauge railroad line, and not just to Prescott, but all the way to Phoenix. And but it was not going to take a direct route as it should have, which would have gone down through Black Canyon. Imagine that, the railroad right down through Black Canyon directly to Phoenix. And I tell you why. Frank Murphy had a mine out in the mountains just north of Wickenburg, and so he wanted this he wanted this railroad to also go to his mine. So if you've ever wondered why that railroad line they call it a P-vine, if it runs, it's such a wide. I rode that train many times. To come down to Phoenix to see the New York Yankees spring training game or something like that when I was a kid, and it took hours to get from Ash Fork to Phoenix, and but you went down to Prescott, and then you went way out west, out through Kirkland, and down around the mountains, the Weaver Mountains, and you came into then you came in from the down into Wickenburg, and then from Wickenburg on into Phoenix. But it linked up Phoenix now, which was now the capital city. 1892, it was the capital city of Arizona. So it linked, and this is a long story, but I didn't mean to go so long with it, but it linked up Phoenix to the mainline railroad. And so that was so it became an important railroad center, because now you could take the Southern Pacific, the Southern line, the Southern Transcontinental line, and it had a link up from Maricopa up to Phoenix. So you could you could get on the Southern Pacific and then take the branch line at Maricopa and come up to Phoenix, and then catch the Santa Fe and catch it and take it all the way to Ash Fork. And then you were on the Los Angeles-Kansas City Railroad, the line that ran from Kansas City or even Chicago out. So it was really an important railroad center, but it was just a really small little town. And in 1882, when it was founded, and so, but that was important. And then later, as they were building highways in Arizona, they built Route 66. It opened in 1926 as an official highway. It was made an official highway in 1926, and getting ready to celebrate its 100th anniversary. And the highway, there was no Interstate 17 at the time, and there was no direct route from the population centers of Tucson and Phoenix. There was no direct route to the Northern Railroad line at that time, or to northern Arizona. It was all mountains. You had and you can't believe the rough mountain areas. The geography, the Mogollon Rim interrupted. I mean, it was just a block that you had to be pretty daring to try to build a railroad in there. In the mining towns, some of the mining towns did, but no big line ran through, and no big highway did. You'd come in down around Springerville and down through Salt River Canyon from Sholo area, but there was no railroad. I mean, there was no highway line either, and so they built the highway to Prescott up through Wickenburg, and it was 89 US 89. So it went from Phoenix to Wickenburg. And then from Wickenburg up through up Yarnell Hill, treacherous. Yarnell Hill was one of the. It's like Oatman Hill or Oatman Pass west of Kingman. I can remember hearing truckers come through, and they said, "I drove Oatman Pass," and it was like I drove Yarnell. And once I met became friends with a actor named Richard Farnsworth. I'm sure everybody remembers Richard Farnsworth from the movies. And he told me one time, he said, I drove a truck loaded with cattle down the Yarnell Hill, and the brakes went out.
Oh, geez.
And I thought, how many times have I heard that story? And then I would live it myself as a little kid, because when we were when we were traveling, we were going to move to Ash Fork in 1947. We had a 1936 Ford, and we were trying to pull a trailer house. And we made a trial run with the 36 Ford without the trailer house. It was a little two-room junker trailer house that we later lived in for 4 or 5 years, which is another story I hope to tell sometime soon. I hope I get time to tell it here today.
We got sleeping bags. Just keep going.
It was my brothers and I all slept together. I never slept alone till I got married. And it was really, it had no plumbing. It had no running water. That'll probably be my next story, was that with that life in that trailer house. But we were going up Yarnell Hill. I'll finish my highway history with this one. We were going up Yarnell Hill, and Dad had a term he called scotch, to scotch your way up a hill. And that 36 Ford just wouldn't pull Yarnell. Oh, you drive it today, and you think it's like a wild horse that's been tamed today. If you drive it today, that's nothing at all. They got 2 lanes. And they took all the bronc out of it.
They took all the bronc.
The way cowboys say it.
Marshall, this is Stuart Rosebrook. You know, you can still get car sick driving yourself on Yarnell Hill. I don't know what it must have been like in 1948.
It was something. Well, my mom would drive the car, and my 2 brothers and I, and Dad would get out behind the car, and it would go about 5 feet at a time. We'd jam rocks under the back wheels, and then she'd pop the clutch, and then we'd go forward again.
Wow.
We got up the worst part of Yarnell Hill. I'll never forget it. And we decided. We decided when we moved up there, we would take another route, and it would be, and this was in October of 1947. We would take a dirt road, and we went out. And at this time, there was talk of a freeway in West Phoenix along somewhere around 27th Avenue. And we were living with a relative on a farm on 27th Avenue. Yeah, it was farm country then. And so, and by the way, when we were moving to Ash Fork, I had never lived in a town. We always lived on farms in Mesa, Tempe, and Dad had been a stockman at that time. And we didn't own our own place, of course. So the Great Depression was still a big depression, as it was that when I was born, and then when I was 8 years old. We were still in a depression, and so we were living with relatives while Dad tried his luck with hiring out to become a railroader, and so we. And they lived on 27th Avenue, so we hooked up the trailer on 27th Avenue to the 36 Ford, and off we went up 27th Avenue. It was called Mission Drive at that time, and up Mission Drive we went, and we ran out of pavement at Rock Springs, and it became a dirt road at Rock Springs. And there the adventure began. We went up through past. Excuse me. I meant the highway ended at New River, at the New River station there.
This is the old Black Canyon Highway. You can still see that
station from the highway right now. Yeah, and it was the old Black Canyon Highway, and it was the old stagecoach road. From the 1880s, it was a stagecoach road from Prescott to Phoenix, and so we up to Rock Springs, and then through Rock Springs, and then through this we're
Bumblebee. Did you hit? Did you get through
no,
Bumblebee?
before Bumblebee, it was at the foot of the hill there from Bumblebee. It was
Black Canyon City.
Black Canyon City, where that is today, and we wound around there and we crossed the river, and you really had to ford the river there, and then we went up this steep hill, and naturally the car broke down again, and so we sat there and a car came along, highway department truck, I should say, come along, and it picked us up and it towed us. He tied the Ford and the trailer house to the back of his big truck, and he towed us up that mountain. You can still see that mountain today when you're driving up towards Sunset Point, on the interstate.
Yeah.
You look out there, and I every time I come by there, I look and I see that there's that dirt road we went on, and it doesn't look any better than it did, or any worse than it did then. But that was the highway, and they towed us into Bumblebee, and it was a neat little place. It had a old schoolhouse there, and there was a bar that served us everything. It was the meeting hall. It was a restaurant where the cowboys all gathered to have coffee, and it was everything. It was just the meeting, and it was a grocery store. It was a stagecoach stop, and it was a bus stop. Believe it or not, it was either the Santa Fe Trailway or the Greyhound bus. We came through there maybe once a week, and so we lived there for about, this was the funny part. Dad would stop a car. He stopped the car, and he knew what parts we needed. In those days, you could work on your own car, and he knew it. He gave the guy a list of parts, and there was a garage down on 27th Avenue, Mission Drive, and he said, "You'll come to that garage." And it was Mr. Hilding owned the garage, and he said, "Give Mr. Hilding this list, and here's the money for the parts, and if there's any more, I'll send him the money." And so it just, and the guy said, "Okay." So he took it to Mr. Hilding, and Mr. Hilding, when he got the parts, he gave them to another driver who was headed north on the Black Canyon Road, and that was 1947. That's how he did things in 1947.
Wow!
And he delivered the parts to us in Bumblebee, and we were in business again after about 3 days, and we hooked up the trailer again, and off we went. And we got to the other side of the valley there, and there was a long hill again going up to Cordes.
Oh yeah,
and this was Henry. Yeah, Antelope Hill, and it was Henry Cordes' station. He had a station there, and we got to know Henry. We got towed in there too. Here come the highway department again.
Bringing you to the standard station at Cordes.
It was Henry's station there, and we became friends with Henry Cordes, and we were just a good neighbor there, and we once again, my brothers and I explored the area around there and pretended like we were prospectors, and we were, of course, we were missing school, so this was a vacation for us, but Dad again had to work on the car. When he got the parts the same way, ordered them up. And another car brought the parts, and there were very few cars on Black Canyon Highway in 1947.
I'll bet.
And if you even call it a highway, I think we just still call it Black Canyon Road. And then we got the parts, and we left Cordes and picked up the dirt road again and into Mayer. And I remember coming through Mayer and the back road into Mayer there, and it was it was just an interesting old town full of old buildings and everything, and I was fascinated by what I was seeing along the way. And I think I was different from my brothers because they weren't paying any attention. I was just soaking up everything, and to this day I still remember it clearly. I remember Bumblebee. I remember Cordas. And later on, I asked them if they remembered any. They didn't remember any of it. And one was older than me, and one was, of course, too young to probably remember. But it was like I figured it out later. I was actually had become a historian and didn't know it. I don't mean to sound boastful, but I was taking it in, and I soaked it in. We finally arrived in at Prescott and Pavement, and we were on Pavement again, and we drove into Ash Fork, and the first night we were there, we parked down by the roundhouse, and there were they all steam locomotives in, no diesels yet, and the steam locomotives and those train whistles. I learned to love that sound of that locomotive and that train whistle. But that first night I thought, oh man, I'm never going to get a good night's sleep again. And later on we'd come back to visit in Phoenix, and I'd be out on that farm, and I'd think it's too quiet out here. I got to hear these trains.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, you probably remember the trains from Kingman.
Oh, big time. Yeah. No, that was great.
And you never forget that no. You just love that sound, the engines chuffing. And I didn't know this was going to be a long time home. I had no idea what was coming. And we went to the Ash Fork school, and there was they didn't have gates over. They had to get over the fences because cows got into the schoolyard. So you to get into the schoolyard, you climb. They had stairways, little wooden stairways built over the schoolyard, so that you climb these and drop down into the schoolyard. That's how you got in and out of the schoolyard, because to keep the cows, out from wandering in there.
Marshall?
Leaving there.
I think we're going to have to get Bob to paint a picture of that. I've never seen an illustration of the Ash Fork school kids in line. It reminds me, I can just see almost a Norman Rockwell painting of a line of boys and girls with their lunches, their different clothes, walking into Ash Fork school.
Yeah. Fabulous. Hey, Marshall, did your dad ever pick up hitchhikers?
Oh, yeah. Dad couldn't help it. Mom used to always say, somebody's going to knock you in the head someday and take your car. And but that was Dad. He had to. He had hitchhiked, and as a young man coming from Texas to Arizona, he had hopped trains and hopped freights and stuff like that to travel as a young man, and so I think that was the reason for it. And then during the war, there were always servicemen standing beside the highway, hitching a ride home. They were on leave or liberty or something, and so that was common then. And Dad just didn't think about anybody, any danger to it, but Mom always worried about it. But we were coming back. My grandpa had my favorite hitchhiking story was my grandpa had a ranch up near Rifle, Colorado, and so we drove up there in the old Model A one time. We had a Model A at this time, and we went to visit him. And as we were coming back, my brothers were all close to the same age, and we fought. We would fight. We didn't have any other kids around us when we were on the farm then, and when we had nobody else to fight, so we fought each other. And so when we got in the car, here we were in this long drive, sitting in the back seat of a Model A, and we'd been fighting all the way and just driving my mom crazy. Didn't bother Dad. I don't think he was even listening, but my mom was sitting in the front seat, just trying to break us up, leaning over and swatting whoever which she could reach, and there's an Indian standing right around Shiprock there. There was a tall old Navajo, gray-headed man standing there, a stoic-looking fellow with a hat and that Navajo, that black hat, and Dad saw him hitchhiking there beside the road, just pulled over, and man ambled up and got in the car. And he climbed in the back seat of the car, and my brothers and I we stopped fighting, and we turned and watched this man, and he never hardly looked at us. He just sat there looking straight ahead and didn't say much. He just told my dad he was going to Gallup, and so we stopped fighting all the way from Shiprock to Gallup. That car was quiet, not a peep out of us, because we sat there just enamored and speechless, watching this interesting man. And but he had nothing to say, and pretty soon we pulled into Gallup there on Route 66, and he told my dad that this is where he got off. He needed to get off. And as we were driving away, headed on back towards Holbrook, my mother looked, and she said, I wonder if there's some way we could go back and get him and take him the rest of the way home.
That is a great two-lane tale. That's exactly the kind of story that we want to do. Thank you so much, Marshall Trimble. You are a treasure, a national treasure, and we love you. Your contributions to True West for the past 24 years have been nothing short of extraordinary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marshall.
My pleasure. It's been my pleasure the whole time. It's the best job I ever had.
Well, I love this. My good friend Paul Hutton said this about the 66 Kid. Bob Boze Bell has journeyed down many roads in his multifaceted life: musician, artist, radio and television personality, author, publisher, historian, devoted husband and father. But all roads lead back to Kingman, Arizona, and the Mother Road. Buckle up and enjoy one wild ride. I couldn't say it any better than that. This is a book about growing up on Route 66 back in its heyday when gas was not cheap, especially in Kingman, Arizona, but we would probably cut your fan belts. It's got tons of stories about the bands I was in, all the mischief I got into, and you're going to enjoy it. It's called The 66 Kid, and I'm working on a new book now called The 66 Kid, plural, with Marshall Trimble, who is the historian for the state of Arizona, and it's going to be a dilly as well.
And where can they get it?
Check it out at bobbosebell.com, or you can check it out at the66kids.com.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, but you can join us again next week. We look forward to that. And thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Bob. And Marshall, thank you very much. I always have a smile on my face every time I hear one of your stories, and thank you for just being you and for being here. And there are other people we want to thank for the time. Russell True and the outstanding team of cowboys and cowgirls at White Stallion Ranch in Tucson, and the Tombstone Monument Ranch, of course, in Tombstone, and the True Ranch Collection and their beautiful places of Western hospitality throughout the Southwest. From Phoenix, Arizona, the 66 Kid, Dan Harshberger, who does that wonderful logo designs for us. And we thank KB Woods. Who's KB Woods? Well, that's Keith B. Woods of KB Woods PR. They provide music, support, and advocacy for us. We are grateful to them. And from Cary, North Carolina, it is the What It Takes Radio Gang. Thank you for putting all those things together. And thank you for tuning in this week. We will be back next week from Prescott and Cave Creek, Arizona, with another thrilling episode of Two Lane Tales. Two Lane Tales is a weekly podcast, and it's brought to you by the 66 Kids, a Quo Vadis Communications production in association with the Tombstone Monument Ranch and the True Ranch Collection.